blackest eyes, the devil's eyes, blank, pale, emotionless face. I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
What makes the serial killer Michael Myers so much more terrifying than other staples of the horror genre? Michael Myers has become one of the most iconic faces of the slasher genre since his debut over 40 years ago, and for very good reason. Even now, he is one of the most horrifying, fear-inducing villains of modern cinema. But why exactly is this? What makes Michael Myers so much scarier than other villains in the genre? Well, today, my friends, and travelers of the underworld, let's discuss why Michael is so much different than the other villains, and demands the fear that he does. The horror genre thrives on the use of misinformation, and more specifically, the lack of information. Human beings are hardwired to fear what they do not understand, and if you don't understand something, you're predisposed to fear it. In fact, the human imagination is often more potent than anything that can actually be put on screen because it's subjective. The more we learn about iconic horror villains, the less we come to fear them because we can deploy countermeasures based on what we know of them and what we can learn. Once we know a villain has a weakness that can be exploited, we become hopeful that they can be beaten and destroyed. Michael Myers, however, remains an enigma even after all these years. Even though we learn about his past, his backstory, and origins, and things of that nature, we still do not completely understand what Michael is, what drives him. It appears as though he simply doesn't have a motive beyond killing, simply because this is what he does. Michael cannot be reasoned with, bargained with, or psychologically assessed in any meaningful way. His doctor came to this conclusion, Loomis referring to Michael as pure evil without any psychological justification for any of his actions. But what do the real-world psychologists have to say about Michael's condition? Is it possible that the real-world psychology can demystify the mental state of Michael Myers in order to make him more understandable, and therefore less terrifying? In the official tie-in reports, Michael is confirmed to have at least 4 known disorders, so let's talk briefly about what's already confirmed before diving into some of the real-world science. Michael's known ailments are psychopathy, sociopathy, schizophrenia, and stupor, but some psychologists challenge his diagnosis. Psychopathy is described as a lack of empathy and compassion for the sanctity of human life. This is different from sociopathy for a few different key reasons. Sociopathy was actually the former name for antisocial personality disorder, and they largely mean the same thing. Psychopathy, however, is a category within antisocial personality disorder and is used to describe specific behaviors rather than an overarching condition. Stupor, however, means that someone is almost completely unresponsive to external stimuli. This condition lies just one away from a victim being completely comatose, and the only difference is that someone suffering from stupor can still respond to extreme stimuli, such as pain or intense fear. Someone who is comatose, however, is entirely unresponsive to any external factors. Over the years, several real-life psychologists have sought to understand exactly what makes Michael tick, and have come up with a few different possible answers. Let's begin with the research conducted by Dr. Anthony Tobia of the Department of Psychiatry from the Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. One option that Dr. Tobia poses is the idea that Michael Myers suffers from conversion disorder, which is described as a loss of physical and sensory function. We know that Michael lost the ability to speak at a young age, or at least he chooses not to. This fits neatly with the way the conversion disorder is described, but what's interesting is that Dr. Tobia does not believe Myers is a psychopath. Textbook psychopathy is described as a lack of moral concern or empathy, which does seem to fit Michael rather well, but it's also accompanied by a healthy dose of extroversion. Many psychopaths are charming, outgoing extroverts. It's also largely accompanied by an inflated sense of self-worth, which Michael doesn't ever seem to demonstrate. Given his affinity for targeting sexually active victims, one possibility is that he was abused in a similar way as a child, but since Dr. Loomis never addresses this, we can't be certain as to whether or not this was part of his past. John Carpenter, though, the man behind Michael Myers and Halloween, has stated that Michael does not specifically target sexually active individuals or victims, and that the story simply played out that way, but that Michael will kill indiscriminately. Dr. Loomis also cites a physical condition known as catatonia, which contributes to Michael's physical movement. It's commonly associated with the way certain mental illnesses can affect the body and limit movement. This could explain why Michael doesn't move particularly fast. It's also interesting to note that many individuals who have schizophrenia also have catatonia, which leaves us to wonder if Michael might be schizophrenic, but this is speculative and cannot be outright confirmed. But aside from physical ailments that seem to be restricting Michael, what sorts of other psychological afflictions might he have? What's also interesting to note is that Michael is a creature of habit, and not only is he programmed to kill in similar ways, but he follows the same subsequent ritual. He seeks to return to the same window and the same view after each kill for a reason that seems to be rather vague, but calls back to the first night where he murdered his sister. What this indicates is that Michael may be afflicted with OCD, which is what drives him to return to the same patterns. Some of the most extreme characterizations of OCD include an incessant need to harm living things. Harm OCD, as it's called, is a series of very potent and very strong intrusive thoughts that compel the victim to cause bodily harm to someone else. It's important to note though, very important, that most people afflicted with harm OCD do not ever carry out any of these impulses. And just because someone is diagnosed with harm OCD doesn't automatically make them dangerous whatsoever. Michael, however, might be demonstrating the furthest extreme of this condition. Keep in mind, Michael is fictional. When dealing with these real-world problems, it's important to address them from a place of understanding. Back to the fictional though. As far as his actual motivation goes, he doesn't seem to ever clearly demonstrate one. Historically, several real-world serial killers have tended to follow patterns that have to do with seeking out feelings of control. This is why some serial killers develop a victim profile. In the summer of 1974, famed serial killer Ted Bundy attacked at least 7 young women who all looked very similar. Nearly all of them had long dark hair parted down the middle, and his ability to choose this specific type of victim allowed him to feel in control. But Michael, again, will kill indiscriminately. He's terrifying because he doesn't pick and choose. He doesn't have a real motive. No need to feel in control. He doesn't even seem to know why he's killing. He doesn't get any joy out of it whatsoever. And that, my friends, is what makes Michael Myers the most terrifying villain in perhaps cinematic history. He doesn't need a motivation. It's a part of him. To kill is to be Michael Myers. He repeats the same process because that is what he is. He is a monster. He is a personification of evil. All those that study him intently realize that Michael does not need any reason whatsoever to kill. Michael is a predator of the night that will kill any prey that is unfortunate to cross his path. He has no motivation other than fulfilling the role for what he is, a monster. Nothing behind the black eyes. Michael represents death, evil, something that perhaps is no longer even human. He does not have, nor does he need a motivation to kill. It is simply who and what he is. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on Michael Myers? Is he truly one of the most terrifying villains in all of fiction? And what are your thoughts on what exactly pushes Michael Myers? Thank you as always so much for watching today's video, my friends, and I'll hopefully see you in a later one.